What if a mechanic girl inherited a rusted cargo ship, and inside, she uncovered a Cold War secret that the government had buried for 40 years? This isn't just some spooky ship story. It's inspired by real declassified files. Hidden behind welded doors and forgotten corridors was something so dangerous. People were willing to kill to keep it quiet. But she didn't run. She fought back. And what she uncovered, Operation Nightfall, a name erased from history until now. But before we dive in, tell us where are you watching from? We love seeing our global family in the comments. Let's get started. Evelyn Monroe sat on the concrete steps outside her father's old garage, watching the Pacific fog roll in like it had something to hide. The smell of salt, rust, and motor oil filled the air normal in Astoria, Oregon, where the ocean was both a blessing and a curse. She pulled her jacket tighter. Even in June, the wind bit like November. Across the street, the skeleton of the old fish cannery loomed in silence, its broken windows staring out at the river like hollow eyes. Just like everything else in this town, it had outlived its purpose. Just like her. It had been 2 years since her father died. 9 months since she dropped out of the local college to care for her little brother. And almost every day since, she'd woken up to the same question. Is this all there is? The clang of a wrench falling on concrete broke her thoughts. Mason called from inside the garage. We're out of peanut butter. He was 10 now. Too young to understand loss, but old enough to know when his sister was barely holding it together. Evelyn stood, wiped her hands on her overalls, and gave him the kind of smile you fake so hard it aches. I'll grab some later, she said. She always said later. The truth was there was nothing left in the fridge, and even less in the bank. The side jobs fixing boat engines had dried up, tourism was down, and most people here fixed their own problems or let them rot. That's what Astoria was, a town of old boats, old men, and old ghosts. That night, as Evelyn sorted through a pile of unopened mail and overdue bills, one envelope stood out. Heavy, thick paper, a government seal. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a formal letter. As the last known beneficiary of Thomas Monroe, as Navy retired, you are hereby granted ownership of the SS Meridian Belle, currently docked in long-term impound at Pier 47, Columbia River Bay, Astoria, Oregon. Evelyn blinked. A cargo ship. Her father never mentioned a ship. He hadn't owned more than a pickup and a box of tools. Why would a decommissioned vessel be registered to him? And why now? Mason, she called. Voice shaking. You want to go see something tomorrow? He popped his head out from the bedroom. Face lit up. Where? She looked at the letter again. Pier 47. Less than 2 miles from where her father had taught her to change her first spark plug. To the harbor, she said. We're going treasure hunting. Mason grinned like it was Christmas. Evelyn forced a laugh. But something deep inside her shifted, something old, almost forgotten. She didn't believe in fate. Not really. But something about that name Meridian Belle tugged at her like an anchor. And for the first time in months, she let herself hope, just a little. Fog blanketed the marina like a secret that didn't want to be found. Evelyn parked her truck beside the chain-link fence that separated Pier 47 from the rest of Astoria's aging harbor. A faded no trespassing sign creaked in the wind, but no one stopped them. No one ever did. Half the piers were abandoned, and the only security was a one-eyed pelican sitting on a rotting post. Mason bounded ahead, his breath visible in the crisp morning air. Which one is it? He asked, peering down the rows of boats like they were all waiting to be chosen. Evelyn pointed. At the far end of the dock, Rising from the mist like a sleeping leviathan sat the SS Meridian Belle. She was bigger than Evelyn expected, at least 250 feet long, with rust streaking down her steel hull like old blood. The name was barely legible across the bow, the paint long since surrendered to the salt and time. Windows were broken, antennas bent, a heavy chain wrapped around the gangway, but the padlock was rusted through. "She's a beast," Evelyn whispered. Mason, wide-eyed, said, "She looks like something out of a movie." The gangway groaned under their weight, but held. Evelyn went first, testing each step with a mechanic's caution. When they reached the deck, the ship let out a low, aching creak, almost like it was sighing at being touched again after so many years. "She smells like Grandpa's garage," Mason said, nose wrinkling. "Mixed with dead fish and old secrets," Evelyn muttered, brushing a cobweb off her shoulder. They moved slowly, exploring the main deck. Rusted pipes, empty crates, a seagull's nest tucked inside a broken floodlight. Every step echoed like they were walking inside someone else's memory. "Can we go inside?" Mason asked, already heading toward a heavy steel door. It opened easier than she expected. Hinges screamed but gave way. The corridor beyond was narrow and dark, lit only by the sliver of daylight behind them. Evelyn clicked on her flashlight. The beam cut through layers of dust and history. The ship's control room, or what was left of it, sat in eerie silence. Dials cracked, wires dangled. A coffee mug with faded writing "Best Dad in the Fleet" sat next to a broken console, as if someone had just stepped away for a moment and never came back. Then Mason found it. "Ev," he called from down the hall. "Come look." She followed the sound to what must have once been the ship's small library or map room. A metal cabinet stood open, its drawers mostly empty except one. Inside was a leather-bound logbook, still sealed in plastic. Evelyn carefully unwrapped it. The cover read, "Captain's Log, A.R. Callahan, SS Meridian Belle." She turned the pages slowly. At first, the entries were routine weather updates, engine maintenance, port inspections. Then, near the back, something changed. The handwriting became hurried, jittery. Words were underlined. October 4th, 1983. Cargo manifest revised by government rep. Destination listed as classified. No explanation given. Crew unsettled. October 6th. 2 sealed crates loaded at midnight. Not on any official records. Security detail aboard. No names. No questions allowed. October 9th. Radio orders to change course. Destination now marked Contingency Point Echo. This isn't right. Something is wrong. I can feel it in my gut. Evelyn's heart pounded. "What does it mean?" Mason asked. She didn't answer. Not yet. She flipped to the final entry. October 12th. We're being followed. No visual contact, but radar confirms a shadow. Security detail armed. Crew scared. I'm locking this log away in case I don't make it home. To whoever finds this, we didn't sign up for this. This ship is carrying more than cargo. God help us. Evelyn set the log down slowly. Ev Mason whispered, "Is this real?" She nodded, eyes never leaving the book. "I think it is." They stood in silence for a long moment. The ship groaned again, almost like it was listening. Evelyn felt something shift inside her, a click, like a gear slotting into place. This wasn't just some rust bucket, and it wasn't a coincidence. Her dad must have known something, must have wanted her to find this. She looked at Mason. "We're going to figure this out," she said. "But we don't tell anyone yet, not until we know what's on this ship." He nodded solemnly, like a secret mission. Exactly. As they made their way back to the deck, a glint caught Evelyn's eye up on the ridge near the parking lot. A black SUV, tinted windows, engine running. When she looked directly at it, the vehicle pulled away, Someone else knew. And someone didn't want them poking around. The next morning, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. She hadn't told anyone about the logbook, not the dockmaster, not their neighbor Bonnie, who usually knew everything before anyone else did. She hadn't even told Mason that she didn't sleep a single minute last night. But the black SUV from the marina, it haunted her like a shadow with headlights. Still, she came back. She and Mason returned to the Meridian Bell early. This time with tools, flashlights, gloves, pry bars, even a small crowbar from her dad's old Navy trunk. If the ship had secrets, she wasn't going to stop at a captain's log. She was going to find them. They started on the lower decks. The air grew colder the deeper they went, thick with the scent of diesel, mold, and time. Pipes ran like veins across the ceiling. Every footstep echoed. "Creepy," Mason said. "Cool, but creepy." They found a mess hall first. Plates still sat on the tables, plastic trays with the remains of food turned to dust, a deck of cards mid-game, an ashtray filled with long-dead cigarettes, a chair knocked over as if someone had left in a hurry. It felt abandoned, but not empty. Then Mason found a sealed door, thicker than the others, reinforced. "Ev," he whispered, pointing. "What's this?" Evelyn knelt beside it, welded shut from the outside. No labels, no markings. But there were scratch marks near the edges of the door, like someone or something had tried to get out. She didn't say anything, just reached for her pry bar. The steel groaned, gave a little, but not enough. Whatever was behind that door was meant to stay there, at least for now. They explored further, moving past crew quarters filled with rusted lockers and old uniforms. Evelyn's flashlight caught a flash of silver near the base of a bunk. She crouched and pulled it out. A key. Heavy. Brass. With a strange symbol etched into the handle, a triangle inside a circle. Almost like a naval seal, but not one she recognized. Mason stared at it. "That looks important." Evelyn pocketed it. "Yeah, it does." Back on the main deck, they returned to the captain's quarters to search more thoroughly. The room was a disaster. Drawers pulled out, papers torn, everything coated in grime. Evelyn yanked open a filing cabinet and... "Whoa," she breathed. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a second logbook, this one marked, "Confidential eyes only assigned Officer Whitaker." She turned the pages with care. This wasn't about cargo runs or weather updates. These were mission notes. 10-183 special cargo delivered under Black Seal, 3 crates, 2 marked with NATO clearance, 1 unmarked, no customs inspection. Orders to maintain radio silence. 10-483 civilian crew not briefed. Questions arising. Security detail instructed to contain curiosity. Mort 1. 10-683 change in course. New coordinates received via unmarked channel. No origin traceable. Destination Point Echo. Atlantic Deep Sector. Evelyn's blood ran cold. This ship hadn't been decommissioned. It had been silenced. Just as she reached the final entry, Mason, who'd been exploring the hallway outside, ran back in. Breathless. "Ev, someone's on the ship." Evelyn's heart jumped. "What?" "I heard footsteps on the main deck. Heavy ones, not echo real." She grabbed Mason by the wrist and killed the flashlight. They ducked low in the shadows of the captain's room, heartbeats loud in their ears. A clang echoed through the ship. Then a voice. Low. Male. With an accent she couldn't place. "Hello, anyone aboard." The voice wasn't friendly. It wasn't casual. It was controlled. She reached for her wrench, not a weapon, but the heaviest thing she had, and motioned for Mason to stay quiet. The footsteps grew louder, closer, then faded as the intruder moved to another part of the ship, When the sound disappeared completely, Evelyn waited a full 5 minutes before whispering, "We're leaving. Now." They retraced their steps through the narrow corridors, using a different path to avoid whoever had entered. When they reached the gangway, the SUV was back. But this time, it wasn't alone. Another one was parked beside it, and a figure leaned against the driver's door, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. He watched her without blinking. Evelyn didn't flinch. She held Mason's hand tightly and walked them straight down the dock. The man didn't follow, didn't move, but she knew he'd be back. Back at the trailer, Evelyn locked every door, drew every curtain, and finally, she pulled the brass key from her pocket and set it on the kitchen table beside the 2 logbooks. Mason sat across from her. "You think this is dangerous?" he asked softly. She looked at him. "I think it's bigger than us." He nodded. "Do we stop?" She smiled, the way her father used to when things got bad. "No," she said. "We go deeper." And outside, hidden in the trees across the street, the man in sunglasses picked up a phone and said just 3 words. They found it. Evelyn hadn't left the trailer in 2 days. The brass key sat on the table like a loaded gun. Beside it, the captain's log and mission notes lay open, pages filled with cryptic references, altered coordinates, and warnings that no one had ever meant for her to read. She didn't know what she was more afraid of. What was on that ship, or who was watching to make sure she never found out. But fear didn't pay bills, and it sure as hell didn't stop her from being a Monroe. Her dad had once told her, "If you're scared, go anyway. That's how you know it matters." So she packed the logs into a backpack, stuffed the key inside her jacket, and told Mason to stay inside. "If anything feels wrong, you call Bonnie. Then lock every door and wait for me to call back. Got it?" Mason nodded, face pale but trusting. "Be safe." "I'll try," she said, "but safe might be off the table." The public library in downtown Astoria sat between a shuttered cafe and a laundromat that only took quarters. It smelled like old paper, lemon cleaner, and secrets. Evelyn approached the front desk, where a middle-aged woman with silver streaks in her dark hair was shelving microfilm reels. Her name tag read, "Ruth Delgado, reference archivist." "I'm looking for someone who understands Cold War shipping routes," Evelyn said quietly. Ruth looked up over her glasses. "Depends. You looking to smuggle vodka or decode history?" "Little of both." Ruth studied her for a beat, then gestured toward the research wing. They sat at a corner table surrounded by dusty volumes and flickering computer monitors. Evelyn laid the logs out slowly. Ruth's eyes narrowed the moment she saw the word classified. "Where did you get this?" she asked, voice suddenly lower. "Off a rusted ship that's been sitting in our harbor for 40 years. Ruth leaned in. "You found the Meridian Belle." Evelyn blinked. "You've heard of her?" "Of course I have," Ruth said, voice tightening. "Everyone who's been in this town long enough has. She came in under federal escort in 1983, offloaded nothing, crew vanished, no dock records, and then she was locked down." Evelyn's heart thudded. No one ever asked. "People did ask," Ruth said, "and then people stopped asking. That's how these things work." She thumbed through the logs like a detective at a crime scene. When she reached the entry about Point Echo and special cargo, her face went rigid. "I'll need time," Ruth said. "This goes deep. Probably federal, maybe even beyond that." Evelyn hesitated. "There's more. I found a key. Brass. With a weird seal triangle in a circle." Ruth's eyes widened. "Where is it?" Evelyn pulled it out. Ruth didn't touch it. She just looked at it like it might explode. "I've only seen sketches of something like this. Once, in a declassified report about covert naval operations, something called Project Stillwater." "What was it?" Evelyn asked. "Nothing. Officially, Just a myth. A Cold War insurance policy, top-secret cargo routes, secret tech transfers, deep water caches, stuff no one was supposed to know existed. Do you think it was real? Ruth looked her dead in the eyes. It was real enough to make people disappear. The lights above them flickered. Ruth tensed. You shouldn't be here long. I need answers, Evelyn said. Who's watching us? Ruth hesitated, then opened her desk drawer and pulled out a printed photograph. It was old grainy, surveillance style. A man in sunglasses standing on a dock. Slight frame, sharp jawline, holding a clipboard. That him, Ruth asked? Evelyn's mouth went dry. It was him, the man from the SUV. Ruth slid the photo over. Name's Victor Kessler, former military intelligence, went private in the early 2000s, now freelances for, well, whoever pays the most. Evelyn stared at the face. He's been at the ship, twice. Then whatever's on that vessel, Ruth whispered, isn't just interesting, it's dangerous. Back at the trailer, Evelyn barely made it to the front steps before she knew something was wrong. The door was ajar. Her stomach turned cold. She burst inside. Mason. No answer. The place was ransacked. Drawers pulled out. Couch cushions slashed. The table flipped over, but no blood, no struggle, no signs of a fight. Then, from the bedroom I'm here. Mason crawled out from under the bed, clutching his phone. His hands were shaking. I hid like you said, he whispered. Someone knocked, but I didn't open it. Then I heard them breaking stuff. I didn't make a sound. Evelyn pulled him into her arms, holding tighter than she ever had. I'm proud of you, she whispered. So proud. Then she looked around. Whoever it was, they hadn't taken money. Or electronics. They'd taken her tools and the backup copies of the logs. But they didn't know about the brass key. Not yet. That night. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, holding the key like it was the last honest thing left in her life. This wasn't just about an abandoned ship anymore. This was about a trail of secrets someone had buried for decades. And now, that trail had led straight to her. I didn't ask for this, she whispered to no one. But somewhere deep in the hull of that rusted ship, something waited to be unlocked. And the key was already in her hand. At sunrise, the fog in Astoria curled low across the harbor like it was trying to keep something hidden. Evelyn tightened her backpack straps and glanced over her shoulder. Mason sat in the passenger seat of the truck, hugging his knees, wide awake, but quiet. He didn't ask where they were going. He already knew. Back to the ship. Back to the Meridian Bell. The harbor was deserted. Evelyn parked beside Pier 47 and scanned the area. No black SUVs, no watchers on the ridge. But she knew better than to trust silence. They were probably still watching, just better hidden now. They crossed the gangway quickly. Inside the ship, the air felt colder than usual, like it knew something was about to be disturbed. Evelyn led Mason down into the lower decks, past the crew's quarters, past the mess hall, past the heavy sealed door they'd found days before. This time, she didn't hesitate. She pulled the brass key from her jacket and stepped toward the steel door. Her hands were shaking. The keyhole wasn't obvious, just a small circle hidden beneath a rusted cover plate near the floor. She'd almost missed it entirely. She knelt, brushed the grime away, and slid the key in. Click! A sound echoed through the hallway like a breath held too long finally released. The door unlocked. It swung open with a hiss. Inside was a narrow passage, lined with reinforced walls and strange, metallic panels. This part of the ship didn't match anything else. It was newer, colder, military. Stay behind me, she whispered to Mason. They stepped inside. At the end of the hallway was a vault, smaller than she expected. The kind you'd see in a bank, not a ship. A digital lock panel blinked to life when she approached, displaying a message. Enter access code. Evelyn hesitated. Then she remembered. In the second logbook, less. Whitaker's entry there had been a mention of a phrase repeated twice. Echo protocol, mother's maiden name and last safe date. She took a breath, typed in, Henderson 19293106. The screen paused, then blinked green. Access granted. With a loud hiss and metallic click, the vault door opened. Inside was a waterproof case, heavily padded and sealed with 6 latches. It had U.S. Navy markings but scratched out, and something else underneath in Cyrillic. Russian. Mason stared. Is that a bomb? Evelyn shook her head, heart pounding. No, it's something worse. She pried the case open. Inside were 3 microfilm reels, a sealed envelope marked For Eyes Only Nightfall, photographs, some black and white, others color of people in military uniforms shaking hands, passing briefcases, walking into unmarked buildings. Some of the people were clearly American, some clearly weren't. But what chilled Evelyn most was the last folder. Inside were names. Dozens of names. Each name had dates, payments, and affiliations scribbled beside them. Military officers, politicians, scientists. Ev, Mason whispered. This looks bad. It is bad, she replied. But her voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was steady. They returned to the captain's quarters and spread the documents out on the chart table. Evelyn began cross-referencing the names with public records on her phone. One by one, faces began to match. Current government officials, defense contractors, energy execs. These weren't ghosts of the past. They were power players now, and they'd all been part of something called Project Nightfall. She opened the sealed envelope. Inside was a letter typed, dated October 9th, 1983, signed by Deputy Director Martin Greaves, CIA. This operation is unsanctioned. If you're reading this, you've found what you were never meant to find. The Meridian Bell was repurposed to transport highly sensitive defectors and double agents. The cargo was never meant to reach shore. Termination protocols are in place. If Operation Nightfall is compromised, all assets are to be eliminated immediately. No survivors. Evelyn stared at the page. No survivors? The ship wasn't just forgotten. It was buried on purpose. They'd planned to erase it. They just hadn't finished the job. Yet, what do we do? Mason asked. She looked at him. Then down at the files. Then out the porthole, where the morning light glinted off the harbor like truth waiting to rise. We go public. But they'll come after us. Evelyn smiled faintly. They already are. She gathered the most explosive documents into her backpack photos. Names, the letter, and took pictures of everything else. Digital backups, flash drives. She even emailed copies to a new address she created that morning. She wasn't tech-savvy, but she was a mechanic. She knew how to build things that lasted. Ev, Mason said, staring out the window. You need to see this. She joined him. The SUV was back. But this time, there were 2. And they weren't just watching anymore. 3 men stepped out, all in suits. One of them tall, gray-haired, clean-shaven, was holding a black folder and looking straight at the ship. Straight at her. Evelyn didn't flinch. Not when the second SUV door slammed shut. Not when the man in the tailored suit pulled out a radio. Not even when she realized there were no badges, no uniforms, just silence, coordination, and the kind of stillness that meant danger. She stepped away from the porthole, grabbed the backpack full of evidence, and looked at Mason. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they board. He nodded, eyes wide, but steady. Do I run? No, she said, her voice calm now. You stay. He blinked. What? She crouched in front of him, placing her hands gently on his shoulders. This is bigger than us. Bigger than anything we ever imagined. But I'm not going to hide anymore, and I'm sure as hell not going to let them erase us like they erased everyone else who found this. You said... I know what I said. She cut in gently. But something's changed. She stood, eyes fierce. I'm done surviving. It's time to fight back. They moved quickly. Evelyn led Mason down through the ship's belly to the engineering bay, where the walls were still scorched from a decades-old fire, and the smell of fuel clung to the rusted pipes like ghosts. She found her father's old toolbox tucked under a bench she hadn't noticed before. It had his name etched in grease-pencil T. Monroe. Inside was exactly what she needed. She grabbed two things: an emergency flare gun, a laminated card with military radio codes. Mason, she said, we're going to send out a signal. He frowned. To who? She held up the card. Whoever still remembers what this ship really was. Back in the bridge, Evelyn connected the ship's main antenna to the emergency broadcast channel. It screeched to life, a raspy, analog whisper like the ship was trying to speak again after decades of silence. She tuned the signal, manually click, 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 until the screen displayed. Channel 16, open frequency, archer distress. Then she hit transmit. This is civilian Evelyn Monroe aboard the SS Meridian Belle, formerly U.S. Naval Transport 384C. I am in possession of classified Cold War materials names, photographs, evidence of Operation Nightfall. She paused, heart pounding. This vessel was never decommissioned. It was buried. Someone wants it to stay that way. But I'm not going to let that happen. She let go of the button. Static. Nothing. And then a voice. Faint, male, older. Meridian Belle, confirm last safe date. Evelyn stared. She checked the log. October 6th, 1983. A long pause. Then, coordinates received. Help is coming. Stay low. Trust no one. The line went dead. She turned to Mason. We're not alone. But they weren't safe either. Not yet. The gangway clanged. Footsteps echoed heavy, purposeful. Evelyn killed the lights, motioned for Mason to stay low behind the bridge console, and drew the flare gun. Her hands didn't shake this time. Through the dusty window, she watched two men climb onto the deck, one tall, bald, built like a fridge, the other older, leaner, holding a device that beeped slowly, a signal tracker. They were hunting her. They moved toward the bridge. Evelyn crouched, waited, and when the first one stepped into view, bang! The flare fired, slamming into the bulkhead beside his shoulder in a burst of searing red fire. He cursed, stumbling back as the light blinded him. She yelled to Mason, go service tunnel now. They ran. Down steel stairwells slick with moisture, through narrow corridors that felt like they were collapsing inward. The men followed. She could hear their boots. Closer now. But Evelyn didn't stop. She found the hatch near the engine room, the same one they'd used before. It led out to the lower deck just above waterline. She shoved Mason through, then turned back. One last glance behind her. The ship was still burning with red flare light. The men were shouting. The tracker was screaming. They were close. She dove out the hatch just as a gunshot rang out and metal sparked above her head. Mason was already in the skiff, a rusted little lifeboat they'd untied earlier, just in case. Evelyn jumped in, cut the line, and shoved off. They drifted into the river's current as the first rays of sun began to split the fog. Behind them, the Meridian Belle stood like a wounded sentinel. But Evelyn felt no fear. She felt alive. She held the backpack to her chest like it was sacred. Because it was. Inside wasn't just evidence. It was proof of betrayal, of history rewritten, of sacrifice buried beneath politics and classified ink. She looked at Mason. "You okay?" He nodded. "That was insane." She laughed softly, adrenaline still racing through her blood. "I think we just declared war." They reached the opposite bank, climbed up near the old Coast Guard station, and found a payphone. She dialed the library. "Ruth," she whispered. A beat, then, "Evelyn, where are you? Are you safe?" "No time." Evelyn said, "Listen to me. You were right. It's real. I've got names, documents, even a Navy frequency that's still live. I need you to leak it, now, everything. Upload, print, blow it wide open." "Are you sure?" "No," Evelyn whispered. "But it doesn't matter anymore." She hung up, then turned to Mason. "You ready for this?" He looked at her, his sister, the girl who used to fix carburetors and change brake lines. Now the woman who'd just outsmarted trained operatives with nothing but a flare gun and a wrench. He grinned. "Let's burn the lies down." 3 days later, the world changed. It started as a whisper, an anonymous file drop on a public server, a PDF titled, "The Nightfall Files." Then came the footage. Evelyn's voice, calm but urgent, echoed across a dozen news networks. Her message was simple. This ship, this evidence, these names, they're not from some spy novel. They're real. People died to keep this hidden. My father might have been one of them, but not anymore. No more secrets, no more silence. The flare gun, the chase, the logbooks, everything was out. Every detail, every photo, every name. CNN, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, Reuters. They didn't just run the story, they followed it. The backlash was immediate. Senators denied, generals deflected, analysts speculated. But the truth didn't care about damage control. Because facts, real, raw facts, don't need to shout. They linger. They burn. Evelyn and Mason were placed under federal protection, but not by the people who had chased them. The Office of Internal Intelligence Oversight stepped in, forced by the pressure of public outcry and a growing movement online. Bell Truth. Rust Never Lies. Meridian Files. Ruth Delgado became the story's historian, publishing the first public archive of Operation Nightfall. The documents Evelyn recovered revealed not just espionage but intentional sabotage, hidden chains of corruption that ran from Cold War bunkers to modern boardrooms. And through it all, Evelyn stayed quiet. Until the invitation came. It was a cold morning when Evelyn stepped off the transport van and back onto the deck of the Meridian Bell. She hadn't seen her in over a week, but it felt like years. She ran her hand across the railing. Fresh paint. The Coast Guard had preserved the ship in place, declaring it a temporary historical artifact under federal review. The welding scars had been left untouched. So had the bullet marks near the bridge. They were part of the story now. Waiting at the bow was a woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed, dressed in a navy blazer with medals pinned neatly above her heart. She extended her hand. "Commander Rosalind Hale, Naval Preservation Authority," she said. "We've never had a civilian do what you just did." Evelyn shook her hand. "I wasn't trying to do anything heroic. I was just tired of being scared." Commander Hale smiled. "That's where every real hero begins." Later that afternoon, Evelyn stood in front of a podium hastily set up on the dock. News cameras clicked, reporters buzzed, and behind her, the rusted outline of the Meridian Bell loomed like a truth no one could ignore anymore. She took a deep breath and began. "My name is Evelyn Monroe. I'm not a spy. I'm not a soldier. I'm a mechanic from Astoria, Oregon. But I inherited something I didn't expect. a ship, and a secret. She paused, looking out at the sea of microphones and faces. My father once told me that rust was just metal that survived a storm, and I used to think that meant staying quiet, staying small, staying invisible. But now I know better. Surviving isn't enough. You have to stand. You have to speak. You have to fight to make sure the truth stays true, even when it costs everything. She turned and looked at the ship. This ship carried more than cargo. It carried proof. It carried stories that were silenced. And now, it carries something else. Hope. That night, Evelyn, Mason, and Ruth stood alone on the deck as the sun sank below the Columbia River. Ruth leaned against the railing, eyes soft. "Do you realize what you've done?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "I didn't want to become anything." "You didn't," Ruth said. "You revealed what already was." Mason smiled as he held the brass key in his hand. "So what happens now?" Evelyn looked around, at the ship, at the river, at the stars just beginning to appear. "Now," she said, "now we build something better from the wreckage." She took the key and hung it on the ship's main hatch, right where the world could see it. A reminder that sometimes the most broken things carry the most powerful truths, and that courage doesn't always come from people who wear uniforms. Sometimes it comes from a girl with grease on her hands and a name no one knew until she made sure they never forgot. The story of Evelyn Monroe reminds us of a truth we too often forget. You don't have to wear a badge, a uniform, or hold a title to do something heroic. Evelyn wasn't trained for espionage. She wasn't backed by a powerful agency. She was a mechanic, a sister, a daughter still grieving the loss of her father. But when the time came when the past knocked on her door wrapped in rust and riddles, she answered. And more importantly, she acted. The rusted ship didn't choose her by accident. It waited for someone like Evelyn, someone who could see past the decay and into the truth beneath. Because for Evelyn, and for those who dare to keep asking, the truth was never the danger. The danger was letting it stay buried. And this time, she made sure it didn't. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click to keep exploring the truth with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe courage can come from the unlikeliest places.